everybody. Justin with the Three Geeks podcast here with Sam Rosenberg, author of Live Ready. How you doing, Sam?
Excellent. Thank you very much, Justin.
Awesome. You're here to kind of talk about your book and kind of what got you to writing the book and all about the book. So can you talk a little bit about Live Ready?
Oh, absolutely. So thank you for having me on. Short version, I've been in the business of protecting people and organizations and teaching them how to protect themselves since 1996. So I got out of the Marine Corps back when, had a stint in the Marines, was a Marine officer, landed kind of when I got out in the close protection world, a fancy pants way of saying bodyguarding, and protected a whole variety of people from, heads of state, people like Benjamin Netanyahu when he was the former prime minister at the time, to, celebrities and dignitaries that were in high stakes situations. But around 2003, I had a little philosophical shift that to me, it's good to have a lifeguard, but ultimately you should know how to swim.
Yeah.
So I changed my gears, if you will. I shifted gears from protecting people to teaching them how to protect themselves with the same skills and tools we use to protect public figures. And it's been 20 years now. And I've learned a lot over the years, not only doing protection, but also teaching people and working with a variety of people, from school teachers and soccer moms, if you will, to heads of state, that ultimately I wanted to get this information in the hands of people in a much broader way. So I decided to write this book, Live Ready. And it's really the culmination of everything I've learned and the most important lessons learned over the last 25 years. And it's designed to be kind of an operating system, a driver's manual, if you will, for how to navigate life through the difficult circumstances that are out there.
Sure. That's incredible. And I don't believe this is your first book. So what got you into writing? And is it just a matter of disseminating information in a concise way that you want people to read, or is there more to it? Or
Well, when I wrote two other books, prior to this. The very first book I wrote, Justin, it's called The Path of the Victor. And really what it was an exercise. I'm very into philosophy, warrior mentality, warrior mindset, if you will, stoicism. And I just wanted to do an exercise of writing my own personal philosophy towards life and, how to sort of walk and navigate this warrior path, if you will, through all the various circumstances. It's a small book. I've got a copy of it actually somewhere around here. Actually, I don't.
It's all good.
The other book that I wrote was actually done for one of the Fortune 500s that I worked with. They needed a complete revision of their travel security guidelines. And this exercise of rewriting the travel security guidelines for this organization, and they had thousands of people traveling, we ended up kind of doing effectively a book. And, that turned into this book right here called The Traveler's Guide to Personal Security. So I retained the rights to it and gave them their version, and I rewrote it for a more of a consumer model.
Sure.
But to answer your question, Justin, what goes into it is I had been writing this book here in my head for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
And really, I just had to get to the point where I could actually execute it. And I had two very simple ambitions when I did it. The first one was to be absolutely authentic. I didn't want to try and be a hack and second guess my audience and write a book that I thought people wanted. Sure. I wanted to write what was inside. And the second part of it was I wanted the information to be utterly timeless. And so it deals with the human factors of violence. And whether we're looking 1,000 years ago or 1,000 years from now, it has very little to do with technology. It has all to do with how people interact with each other.
Sure. That's incredible. Yeah. So I do want to ask, as someone, I've really thought about it recently about like how to best protect myself. So like when I knew you were coming on to talk with me, I was like, man, this is like prime opportune. I'm very excited for the book just to read it myself. I'm on your mailing list while I grab the link. The link is below, if the scroller below, people will see it. I think it ships December 6th, so people get to look out for that. But what would you say, not to give away your book, but what was like the core theme or something you want someone like to give away for free to best protect themselves? You know what I mean? What would be something? Yeah.
Yeah, I love that because I give stuff away all the time, Justin. I freely I want people to have this information. In fact, publishing this is like, in my way, giving away 25 years worth of knowledge as inexpensively as humanly possible.
Yeah.
The book actually follows a very simple logic that after, all the time doing what I do, I've come to certain very simplistic conclusions. The first is that we have these two interrelated myths that we deal with on a daily basis. And the first one is what I call the myth of helplessness. The second one is what I call the myth of randomness. People believe that in the face of certain kinds of situations, they're helpless to resist. And the reality is, you are never helpless as long as you can control one factor, if that factor, in fact, is your mind, your ability to think and make decisions. And when we talk about the myth of randomness, the way these things influence us is that we hear it on the news all the time. The people call violence random. It was an act of random violence. Someone just snapped. No one saw it coming. And when we hear these kinds of phrases, what we're really saying is we're somewhat abdicating our personal responsibility. We're saying that if violence is random, it is therefore unpredictable. And if it is unpredictable, what possible, sort of responsibility can you or I or anyone else have to its prevention or response?
Sure.
But the reality is that violence is a process, and it is a process that is as observable and predictable as the changing seasons if you know what to look for. So giving away information, I'd say the most important thing, where's our starting point? We'll talk about situational awareness in a very high level way.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, when a security professional starts talking about situational awareness, they have a reflexive reaction that says, I already pay attention to my environment. I don't need this. The reality, though, is that paying attention is the prerequisite. Okay, that's just the beginning. What you really have to do is know what to look for and when to look. Mm-hmm. So the idea here is being very specific. I go into one of the chapters of the book, we break this down into these 5 lessons of situational awareness. The very first one is that we have to recognize we don't see with our eyes, we see with our mind. Mm-hmm. And in the greatest sense, to quote this, is that we find the world we're looking for. So what we really want to be able to do is observe in a really objective way. To get past all of the biases and all these kinds of things and really trust our natural radar. Now, this is stuff that's been talked about many times. One of the people that I think is tremendous at this is Gavin de Becker, who wrote the book, The Gift of Fear, which I quote in this book. The gift of fear is about being able to trust your intuition. The problem is there's more to it than that, okay? Sure. Intuition is a learning and adapting process that's based on experience. So we have to put knowledge in about what we're specifically looking for. So let's just start there. You're walking down the street, Justin. Mm-hmm. You see someone coming towards you. You have an immediate vibe of fear. And instantly the brain says, creepy guy. Okay. Sure. Women can relate to this on a daily basis. Men can relate to it to a degree. Or, they have experiences. But what happens is we look for evidence, and if we can't spot the evidence and we can't put together an articulable, logical evidence chain that says, aha, here is what caused my fear, our natural tendency is to dismiss it. Mm-hmm. We just say, I'm overreacting. It's probably nothing. It's no big deal. Or we go into our ego mode and we say, I'm not going to be pushed around. Or we go into sort of this modality of a social contract where we say, well, I don't want to judge a book by its cover. And what we end up doing is becoming the only animal in the animal kingdom that would willingly participate in its own victimization.
Sure. Yeah.
We dismiss our radar and we allow ourselves to find ourselves in situations that could otherwise have been avoided. Mm-hmm. So the very first thing we want to do is trust that radar. Yeah. And the way you do it is by overcoming some of the natural dynamics that inhibit it. The number one thing that inhibits our radar is what I would call the veil of normalcy. All right. Mm-hmm. And the veil of normalcy is that most people truly want things to be normal. Right?
Sure.
Normalcy bias, if you will, is the sort of the process that the mind goes through, the gymnastics that the mind goes through to try to find evidence that everything is normal, even when there's evidence to the direct contrary.
Sure.
Okay? So if we're walking down the street and we get that vibe, trust it. Just don't dismiss it.
Yeah.
Recognize that all of the mental gymnastics we go through to say it's no big deal, a social contract, all this stuff is some level or other, a degree of our natural desire for things not to be potentially dangerous.
Sure.
Now, if we recognize that it is in fact dangerous, then what do we do about it? We have to recognize that we could be in a situation that requires some tactical execution. That could be leading, managing that interaction, whatever it is. But if we go back to the situational awareness dynamic, the first component is to trust our radar, not override it.
Mm.
The second is this: how do we create evidence? Well, if I see someone and he gives me a bad vibe and I want to validate it, look at him, right? Every environment that we find ourselves in has a purpose, okay? So a parking lot, for example, the purpose of a parking lot is to park your car, go in the store, come out, drive away, right?
Yeah.
So if you're walking through the parking lot, as an example, and you spot someone using that space in a way that does not conform to the space's natural use, the question should be why?
Yeah.
What's going on here? So the quickest way to evidence chain this is, why is this person not using the space for its intended purpose? Now, we can tell the difference between someone who is, say, waiting for a ride or a ride share versus watching people coming and going. Well, if you see the guy as someone watching people, which is another one of the lessons, is to watch for the watchers. Instantaneously, we have a different level of perspective on what is this guy doing here. The interesting thing about being a watcher and watching for the watchers is that it literally does two things. The first is it lets you recognize better danger. The second is it allows bad guys who may be watching you to see that you are not an easy target. Just keeping your head on a swivel, if you will, and recognizing that I need to pay attention. Right?
Yeah.
And the dynamics there, the final components of this that I won't get into in sort of bullet point fashion. It's just know what your options are. If you realize that you're in a situation that doesn't have a positive outcome for you, right? You have to be able to respond, whether it's in a concert hall or walking through that parking lot. Always be aware of where you can go, right? Know your exits, know what your options are. Does that make sense?
Oh, a ton of sense. And if you allow me to go on a little bit of a tangent, I want to get your personal opinion on something, because I had a very similar scenario, not the parking lot aspect, but I went for a walk right during COVID. Went down the street, way far away. I was on the phone with my dad, had AirPods in, and someone came up and hugged me. It was like I didn't know what to do. I froze. My adrenaline just dumped, because I was like, am I about to get attacked? Because I didn't hear him. I was talking to my dad. I had him screaming in my ear because he was like, what's going on? Because you hear the muffling of cloth against, I was like this. I was like, thankfully he just hugged me. But I didn't, you know what I mean? I didn't know how to respond. I literally froze. It was not I didn't hit him. I didn't do it. I was just I don't know what to do with the scenario I'm in. What do I do? It was to your point. I had no awareness of that he was about to do that, or the expectation that someone was going to cross the street and do that to me while I was talking to my dad. It was wild. I still remember him yelling into my ear. It was, it's important.
So, Justin, your experience is really an interesting one, because people have these experiences. Thankfully, you were not attacked, right? Thankfully, it ended up being a benign type of thing. But what's interesting about it is, why do we freeze? Right? So, you look like someone who could easily handle himself. You've been around the block, obviously. You're not a pushover. The concept is, why is it that we tend to freeze? Well, what happens is, and I go into this in detail, I believe, in the second chapter of the book, right? Sure. Is we get into the idea that when we respond to anything, if you actually think about it in a very simplistic way, it doesn't matter what we're reacting to. It could be someone pointing a gun at us. It could be someone, menacing us or grabbing us unexpectedly, or it could be a deer jumping in front of our car. When our brain takes that information in, it goes through a very specific 4-phase process that I call SAFE: stimulus, analysis, formation, execution. So what happens is, we receive the stimuli that begins the process. and we immediately analyze that stimuli based on experience. If we have experience, then we have the ability to form plans. If we don't have the ability, if we have the ability to form plans, at the end of the day, we can make a decision whether or not we want to execute the plan or not. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's take your scenario one step further. Let's say instead of it was someone just surprising you with a hug, someone puts a gun in your face. Okay. So that's a stimuli that most people have never encountered. And it's actually, thankfully.
Yeah.
And it's something that I use as a demonstration because the concept here is just a fake gun, and the body language of that will create a lot of that paralysis response. But what's happening here is our brain hits the analysis phase, and there's either no information there to follow, to draw on, or the information that we have or the experience that we've had was, say, negative or traumatic.
Sure.
What happens is we get stuck in the analysis phase, and that is literally what creates a degree of paralysis.
Sure.
We freeze. Most people think, it's fight, flight. Well, flight was never meant to denote behavior. It was meant to denote a reaction of the internal mobilization of our resources to fight, to survive, or flee and escape dangerous situation, adrenaline. The thing is that our behaviors are far more complex. We might fight, we might flee, we may negotiate, we may lay in wait, we may sort of feign, submission. There's a whole bunch of different things that we can do. The concept, though, is speaking to the physiological reaction of why we freeze.
Yeah.
Literally, we hit this wall, and it's like a computer searching for an answer. And there's no answer there, so we get stuck. Okay? First time I had a gun pulled on me. All right. First time, guy sticks a gun. I was working as a bouncer. Okay. And I'll share the story real quick if you don't mind, Justin.
No, all the time in the world. Yeah, sure.
So literally, I'm working as a bouncer is like my first security job. I'm in college. And, a friend of mine says to me, Sam, do you want a job where you can meet lots of girls but get paid next to nothing? Like, of course. Right.
Yeah.
So next thing I know, I'm working as a bouncer in a college bar. Okay. And I was on something like my second shift, literally. Right. It was like a Friday night. The place was jammed. And I'm sitting there. I'm only 20 years old, not even old enough to drink in the bar. And I'm trying to check IDs and look like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And the sum total of training for this position was the manager, when I was hired, telling me, like, if there's trouble in the bar, we're going to flash the lights in the vestibule where the bouncers hung out, running in and figure it out. Okay.
Fair enough.
So I didn't know any better. Here I am. All right. Friday night, place is jammed, lights flash. Okay. Me being the gung-ho guy that I am, I got to be the first one through the door. So I start pushing my way through this shoulder-to-shoulder crowd.
Yeah.
Get to this fight. And what it was there was this kind of like in my 20-year-old brain, what looked like an older guy. Okay. He was probably like 40. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But he was, in my brain, he was older. And he was getting the better of this college kid. Okay. Well, I pushed the older guy off. I pinned the college kid to the bar because I didn't want him to come back swinging. My assumption was my fellow bouncer who was right behind me would come and grab this guy.
Sure.
He hesitates. The older guy doesn't. He bounces off a crowd, pulls a gun out of his waistband, sticks it in my face, and says, "Now I'm going to kill you." All right. So the interesting thing about this was my brain, you know how they say your life flashes before your eyes?
Sure.
Well, I can tell you my life has never flashed before my life, Justin. Okay. In this situation or any others that I'd say qualify for deadly force. What did happen though was interesting. My brain instantaneously jumped back like in millisecond to this flashback memory of having a conversation with my dad. Okay. And I was doing karate or something in this memory. And I asked him, I was like 12 years old. I said, "Dad, what do I do if a guy's got a gun?" And I remember my dad telling me in this very well-meaning, but ultimately unhelpful way, he says, like, do whatever the guy with the gun tells you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So I instantly flashed to this moment, and my computer program was do whatever the guy with the gun tells you.
Yeah.
The problem is he wasn't telling me to do anything.
Yeah.
He had threatened me, but it was a disconnect. And I did the exact same thing as you, Justin. I literally froze. Right? And I was stuck in this immobilized moment that then when the adrenaline hit and everything started to get quiet and everything looked like it was looking down a tunnel and felt like it lasted like 2 minutes.
Forever. Yeah.
I had this, like, probably only lasted a couple seconds, but it felt like this elongated delay. At some point I realized this is thoroughly unhelpful and unproductive and I have to do something. So I grabbed the gun and we negotiated our way out of it. And I would tell you, it was just luck that nobody got shot. Right?
Yeah.
But the dynamic here was that moment in my history pivoted my career. Okay. I was going to be a school teacher. All right. And I literally went back in the vestibule of the college bar at that night. And I was thinking to myself, what the hell just happened here?
Yeah.
Right. And why was it everything that I thought I knew about violence? I was a wrestler, I was a martial artist, all this kind of stuff. None of it computed anymore. None of it made any sense. And I wanted to figure this stuff out. And that literally was the decision point that I said, okay, I'm going to go where the toughest people on the planet were, join the Marines, went through the OCS program, yada, yada, yada. Here we are today. Okay. But that was the purpose of this book, literally, was how do I explain this stuff that is people do not know, and how do we overcome it? Because what happens with most people, Justin, maybe a little bit in your scenario too, was I have this moment where I have an inability to react. And I think about it afterwards going, what the hell's wrong with me?
I had exactly that. I was like, because I've done martial arts all through my 20s. Like, I was like, I can definitely throw a kick. I can punch a guy. Like, it was just like, I just didn't know what, like, I was not prepared for that specific thing. I was like, well, I guess I'm stuck. I don't know.
And the natural reaction, let's take that to the most extreme for a second. Let's get dark for a second. All right.
Yeah.
In every instance of mass homicide where someone survives, very often, where people survive, very often we will hear the same story where people say, I didn't know what to do, so I played dead. All right. I guarantee you playing dead was not a conscious coping mechanism. It was a complete paralytic response that we talk about in the book called tonic immobility, where people literally, they lost the ability to physically take action to function. They're still there cognitively, but the brain, the part of the brain that is responsible for our survival, has effectively shut you down into the most extreme level of paralysis. Women who are sexually assaulted, very often, something in the neighborhood of 68% of the time, experience a degree of tonic immobility. It's not that they didn't want to fight back, it's that they physically couldn't. Okay. And this is the main enemy, if you will. All right. It's not the bad guy. It's losing the ability to perform under high stress situations. And when we turn that around and say, what is the objective of the book, Live Ready? What is the objective of my company and the training that I provide? It's to ensure that you can think and make good decisions, even under extreme stress. It's not about turning people into a ninja, right? And that requires a specific kind of mindset and a specific kind of training. And that's why we begin by unpacking, if you will, this what I call myth of helplessness that has been woven into the fabric of our society. Okay. And we've all been conditioned. The story I like to use about that is, again, not to get, unhappy stories in here, but the story I like to share is it's like the story of how they used to train a circus elephant. Okay. That what they used to do was take a baby elephant when it's small and chain it to a stake in the ground. All right. And this little baby elephant would pull on that chain until eventually it gives up. And what happens is, what it means is when it's fully grown and it's the largest, most powerful land mammal on the planet, a human handler can lead it around on the end of a rope. In the mind of the elephant, it's helpless to resist. Okay. It wasn't born that way. It became conditioned. Okay. And I truly believe that most people have been similarly conditioned, that we are incapable or we shouldn't respond to violence and take the responsibility on our own. But we know that the lifeguards won't be there. We have to be able to respond and make decisions. So that's the whole basis of that myth of helplessness. and why we freeze to a very short degree.
Mhm.
I can't wait for you to read the book.
I'm excited. I'm already on the mailing list. As soon as I was like, this is for me. I was like, I was very interested.
Yeah. What kind of martial
awesome.
arts did you do?
I've done Taekwondo. I've done a bit of judo. I've done some Muay Thai. I mean, I was at a college that offered a lot of different things, so I just joined a bunch of clubs and just did it. Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I loved it. If they weren't so expensive, I'd still be doing them as more of an adult, I guess.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, no, I loved it. So I do want to ask you more questions, but when can folks get your book? I know December 6th is shipping, but I know there's a mailing list. Like, what are some of the mechanical pieces of your book? How to get it?
So easiest thing to do is go to livereadybook.com. That's one way to go. You can go to my main website that I see scrolling. The livereadybook.com is our landing page. You can find the book anywhere books are sold. You can get it on Amazon. I'm super excited that we have achieved the top new release tag on Amazon in our category, which is really sweet.
Yeah.
And we were number 2 on the bestseller list in our category, and we're just in pre-sales.
That's incredible.
So I'm super excited. Like, please get out there, buy the book, get a copy for your family, your friends. I just got, right before I got on this podcast, one of my clients said, I think Amazon's so backed up on this that they're pushing people into January for delivery expectation date.
That's incredible for you. That's awesome, man.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I feel like I wish it would come in December so you'd have it for Christmas, but nonetheless. If need be, there's a variety of other booksellers there as well, but please buy the book on Amazon so that we get that traction towards our bestseller status, right?
Sure. Yeah, of course. I also was reading through your website. Are you doing some live, I saw Pittsburgh, I think, and maybe somewhere else, LA? Did I read that right? Yeah.
Well, we're doing a lot. We're having a book kind of signing event, a book launch party in Pittsburgh, December 11th. Okay. Cool. And, if anybody wants to attend, send me an email, go right to our website, shoot us an email, and we'll get you all the invitation information out. Rather than trying to explain it here, I'll just send you the Eventbrite listing. We're looking at doing one probably in January in Los Angeles. Undecided yet exactly when, but it'll probably be in Beverly Hills somewhere. Cool. And I'm based in Pittsburgh. We do a lot of training. So, the book is the foundation of everything. But if you're interested in a live training event or a seminar, just give me a shout.
Yeah, we're a lot of our folks are Midwest based. We're based in Columbus, so hopefully we get some listeners to go out over to Pittsburgh. That'd be cool.
Yeah, outstanding.
Yeah. Cool. I do have 2 questions for you, a little bit deviating from the book and more about your experience. Do you have a fun, guard story, whether that be the military or some celebrity, anything you like sharing, or it might be fun to hear about?
I can't share a lot of details about a lot of my protection assignments because so many of them are confidential, right? Sure. But some of the folks that we protected, that I can talk about, we protected Tom Cruise, we protected Warren Buffett. There's a variety of things like that, but I would rather not get into the
Sure, don't have to. Of course. Mm-hmm. Can I ask what is your mental state like when you're on the job? Do you ever sleep well? How is that you know what I mean? It'd personally be hard for me to not just be on edge all the time if I'm knowing I have to guard somebody else, regardless who that person is.
That's a great question, Justin. I will tell you right now, when I was doing executive protection work, and close protection work, it is you have to have a one-track mind. Okay. So I try to tell people that, doing that sort of work, you have to literally be, for the most part, kind of a warrior sort of hermit, right? Sure. You can't worry too much about other things. And really, as a business owner right now, with all the different hats that I'm wearing, I am not the person to be doing close protection on a 24/7 basis. My head is drawn in 15 different directions. Sure. So I have other people nowadays that I've trained that do that sort of work and do it really, really well.
Sure.
But yes, you have to have a very specific mindset, and you have to remain focused, and you also have to have the ability to relax.
Mhm.
So just like with situational awareness, knowing when you have to turn on and when you can switch off is critical.
Mhm.
You talk to any Secret Service agent or whatever, they would burn out so quickly if they tried to stay on all the time.
Mhm.
That you get really good at cycling when I'm in a moment where I really need to be on top of things and really paying attention to every visual cue and everything else, versus when other people are managing that and I am able to get some downtime and shut down, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
One of the critical things that have always been very helpful for me is yoga
Okay.
and breathing exercises, in terms of managing the
Sure.
stress and being
Sure.
able to go from a high state of focus and stress, if you will, to being able to get back down to baseline and manage. We talk about some breathing exercises in the book, but there's a lot more to it. I would say if you haven't explored yoga, it's a great way to
Sure.
really understand that stuff. I've been
Cool.
doing that since the late 90s.
That's awesome. No, I'll definitely check it out. That's a good suggestion for everybody. I'll definitely take you up on that. That leads me into kind of my last question for you. The transition from being that full-time security personnel guarding someone to like easing into a business owner. What was that transition like? Was it hard? Was it hard to like switch off and be like, hey, I don't have to like obviously be hyper vigilant, but maybe not to that extent of being a professional bodyguard?
Once you're wired a certain way, it never goes away, right? Talk to any combat vet or, military, veteran.
Mhm.
They'll tell you they can spot another veteran a minute, in a second, right?
Mhm.
The thing is that the type of mental process for close protection, it's exhausting. You have to sacrifice a lot. You really don't have any other focuses. What I really specialized in was higher stakes, scenarios where we had very, very high risk. Someone was being targeted and it had a beginning and an end duration. Probably the longest protection detail we dealt with was about 9 months. All right.
Okay.
So, I never really got into the everyday, day in and day out, kind of moving around with a celebrity for the next 3 years.
Sure.
It's a different mindset and a different gig. So we were doing high stakes, relatively short-term protection assignments, and they had a purpose. And what happened was I naturally started to gravitate from doing close protection to doing more protective intelligence work and understanding threat assessment and how to evaluate threats, to teaching self-defense, which I had always been highly, highly interested in and doing. When I wasn't doing close protection, I was teaching self-defense. And I started to have some experiences that make me want to develop my own curriculum, my own system.
Sure. Sure.
And when I first decided to make the change, Justin, I had zero problem with it. I literally went from one day, I'm no longer doing this, and now I'm going to be teaching. And it was about 2 or 3 years, maybe 4 years went by, and I had enough demand from existing clients and people ask me, are you still doing close protection? Can you still support us? Can you still do threat assessment? That I then set up another organization effectively to be able to provide that type of service to our clients. Now we have this kind of 2 organizations technically, but it's all one umbrella. And we provide preparedness and intelligence and protective services. But realistically, Justin, the smallest facet of our business right now is the protective service.
Cool.
It's mostly training and preparedness and support, intelligence work.
Sure. Cool. That's awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure, truly, to talk with you, Sam, tonight. Go check out Sam's book, Live Ready. Please get it. Get it from Amazon. Let's keep it the #1 spot, or get it to the number 1 spot if it's slipped at the time. But awesome. Thank you for joining us, Sam.
Justin, thank you so much.
Of course. It's been great. Thanks, everybody.